What's up guys, Dave with Gen3D Tech here. Today we're taking a look at the VGN Dragonfly F1 series. It's made up of the baseline F1, the F1 Pro, and the F1 Max. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first off, I'd like to thank MechKeys for providing the review samples for this review. But as always, my opinions are my own, and that'll never change the outcome of any review. I wanted to get all three of these so that I could explain the differences all in one review. So far, all the reviews I've seen have just been one mouse, and this is all three: the baseline, the Pro Series, and the Pro Max. And I will go over all the differences in this review, and then you can decide which one works best for you if you're interested in purchasing this mouse after this review. Now, one quick disclaimer: two of these support 4K, these two right here, and unfortunately at the time of this review I do not have the 4K dongle. I am working diligently to try and obtain a 4K dongle so we can test 4K, but for now we'll go ahead and go over everything minus the 4K, and then we'll cover that in a separate video once we're able to get a hold of the 4K dongle. And if 4K is very important to you and you want to get one of these two, you might want to hold off until you can buy the dongle and get them shipped together. Otherwise, you're going to pay 2 shipping fees, and that kind of takes away the best benefit of these mice, which are their low price. So maybe you haven't heard of VGN. I don't think they've been around very long, and they're a Chinese company, and they are mostly focused on the Chinese market. I believe once that they've satisfied the demand for these mice in China, they are going to start to focus on the international market. But this is a nice sneak peek, and again, you can get these at MechKeys, so if you don't want to wait until they start making this available across the world, you can at least get it ahead of time through MechKeys. You can probably also get it on Taobao if you're able to order from that site. Unfortunately, I've never been able to successfully order from there, but if you can, you might be able to get it for a slightly less amount there. And maybe at some point, I believe they are going to sell on AliExpress also, but for right now, MechKeys is the only place I know that you can get it, and it's very difficult to get this right now because of the high demand. I believe they sold 70,000 units already in China, and they're having difficulty meeting that demand. I believe that there was even a release of the 4K dongle, but it sold out very, very quickly, and I think it was only sold in China. Again, I will try and get a hold of that dongle for a future review featuring the 4K options of these mice. Now, the differences of these mice are mostly internal. It does come in black and white. Maybe there'll be other colors in the future, but as far as I know, these are the only 2 colors available. And you can see the logo is a little bit different. This is the base model, and then this right here is the Pro model. And the Pros have the silver kind of filled in Dragonfly logo. Now, you can't just by looking at them tell the difference between the Pro and the Pro Max, but once you pick it up, you will feel the difference, as the Pro Max is 55 grams, which is 6 grams heavier than the 49 of the Pro and the 49 of the baseline. But size dimensions are exactly the same across all three. The internals, other than the MCU and the battery, are exactly the same also. So they have KL 8.0s for the main switches. The baseline has a Compex MCU, which is something you'll find in like Pulsar and Lamzu mice, for example. And then you have the Nordic MCU in the Pro and the Pro Max. And they actually have 2 different Nordic MCUs. And I believe the only difference is on the Max, it's a slightly newer Nordic MCU. But I don't know exactly if there's any differences in the capabilities of those MCUs. Now, again, really the only difference between these two right here are the battery. So the Max has up to 130 hours battery life. It has twice a large battery as the Pro does. So like I said, you get 130 hours on the Max, you get 65 on the Pro, and then on the baseline model, you get 40. Weight wise, 55 grams on the Max, and then 49 on the Pro and the baseline. And everything else pretty much feels the same quality wise. The main difference is the weight on the Max. Now, the weight on the Max does have some other implications as far as the feeling of the structure. At 49 grams, the baseline and the Pro model do feel rather empty. You get a little bit more solid feeling mouse with the Max. Sound wise, when you hear in the test, you also hear these two mice are a little bit more echoey because there's less stuff in there basically. So I do prefer the way the Max sounds and feels. It just feels a little bit more of a sturdy mouse, even though again the shell, the size, all the same, but the bigger battery in it just makes it feel a little more solid for some reason. So dimensions, it's 121 millimeters long, 63.5 wide, and 37.6 millimeters tall. And then on the bottom of the mouse, you have two different configurations of skates. And in the box, you get both types. So on the baseline, they installed the smaller set of skates, but you do have the larger ones just like this inside the box. And vice versa, on the two Pros, you have the smaller sets of skates, which does give you a little bit faster feel having the smaller skates. I do prefer, though, the larger skates to give you a nice smoother feeling. And on both of these, you do have a little storage place for your dongle. You can also just leave it off for a little bit of a weight savings if you like. There's a DPI button and then a power on and off. And then, of course, we've got USB-C for the connector type. Also, there is a little battery indicator light for the DPI. There's also a light right here that will flash when your battery gets low. Now, as far as build quality, it's a pretty solid mouse. Not a lot of flex to it. Doesn't really creak. When you shake it, doesn't make any sound. The Pro is even a little bit solider, as I said before. Again, no issues with the build quality. They're all solidly built mice. The KL 8.0 switches feel okay. I'm not a big fan of them. I would have rather seen some Huano blue shell pink dots in here. Maybe they'll change them out in the future, but they're definitely passable. And as you can see, these are definitely kind of grooved switches, which does give it a little bit more different feeling to it when you're doing your clicks. The scroll wheel is very tactile, and it has a rubber ring that goes around it. One thing I do find is that the sound of the scroll wheel is a bit noisy. It's not the quietest one for sure. So if that's important to you, you may not like that. Side buttons are okay. They're definitely, I would say, good. They're just not great. You do get a little bit of pre-travel. Post-travel is really minimal. Very little flex on the switches. Very quick activating mouse 1 and 2. So very little pre-travel and post-travel. Coding-wise, it's a very slick coding. It's definitely not the best if you're someone who has sweaty hands. They don't really pick up fingerprints, but it is rather slick. Now you do get a set of grips in each one of the boxes. The white ones come with the white ones, and they have some black ones with the black colored mouse. So definitely, if you're someone who doesn't like a slick mouse, you can definitely install these. Or better yet, you can use the Pulsar Super Grip Universal Grip Tape. This stuff is like amazing. So that's definitely an option for any one of your mice. So one other thing I wanted to bring up was the uncanny resemblance to VGN's mice and their box to the Ninjutso Sora and the Sora's box. It even has the same little pull tab on the tops of the boxes. So as you can see, very, very similar. I suspect that since VGN is also a manufacturer, that they produced the mice for Ninjutso. So and also the Sora feels a whole lot like the VGN Dragonfly as far as the quality, the type of plastic that they use, and just the kind of the looks of it. Now they're different shapes, obviously, but you really get the feeling that this mouse and this mouse were made in the exact same factory, which is not a bad thing because they did a really good job with these VGN mice, and I'm a big fan of the Sora. So nothing wrong there. I just thought it was very interesting. So again, in the box, you get a paracord cable, a adapter that has the VGN on there, and then of course your little USB adapter. You do get again an extra set of skates. So if you have the big one installed, you're going to have the smaller ones, and then the grips. So at the time of this review, the cost of each one of the mice is $40 for the baseline mouse, $50 for the Pro version, and then $57 for the Pro Max. Which, for what you get, is definitely an incredible bargain. It was a bit cheaper when they first came out, and that was an introductory price. Most people missed out on it just for the fact that they sold out so quickly. But again, at this price, there's really nothing on the market that offers 4K with these kind of specs and the quality that match this currently. And I believe that VGN is doing this just to create buzz and make a name for themselves. I don't foresee them doing this in the long run. The prices will probably come up on these, and also subsequent models will probably be a little bit higher. They're just trying to get attention, and that type of thing works, of course. So definitely a good deal right now at this price for sure. So initially, I ended up getting this about a month before I was able to get the 4K versions. So I have a little bit more time on the baseline, and definitely I found it to be a really good mouse. And even though it doesn't have the Nordic MCU, it definitely performs just as good as my Pulsar and Lamzu mice for sure. The Pro versions with the Nordic MCU do feel a bit smoother, and they've also updated the software in that time. And there is we'll go over that in the software, but there's a high-powered mode that does use a little bit more power, but it also does give a little bit more smoothness on the sensor. Now, surprisingly, I did not think I was going to like the Max more than the Pro. If I had just had to pick one of them, I was going to pick the Pro just because you get the lighter 49 grams and then the Nordic MCU. But after playing with all three of them, I would say the Max is definitely my favorite, just because it feels a little bit more balanced, not as empty feeling, and just the clicks feel a little bit better. And I think that's because it's not as hollow. Also, the battery life on this is just amazing. I still haven't charged it from the time that I taken it out of the box. So this thing has amazing battery life. Now, we haven't been able to do the 4K, so you're definitely going to lose a lot of battery life once you start using 4K. But I believe that even when you're using 4K, this is still going to have a really good battery life compared to especially most other 4K mice. So let's go ahead and do a weigh-in right now. Baseline model, 48 grams. Pro model, looks like 50 grams. And the Pro Max model, 56 grams. So within margin of error for sure. So let's go ahead and talk about the shape and then what mice these compare to shape-wise. So size-wise, this is kind of a small to medium small mouse, and it definitely kind of reminds me of the Vaxi XE, but a smaller version of it, as if it was kind of a mini, and also does remind me of the Viper Mini, also the Deluxe M800 Pro. So right here is the newest Deluxe M800 Pro 3395. As you can see, it has a similar curvature to both of these mice, and an almost identical length. Of course, it definitely flares out more on the Deluxe Aim 800 Pro, and it does also have the same comfort grooves, but they're maybe a little bit deeper on the Dragonfly, but not by much. And then here is the Vaxi XE. You can see the XE is a little bit taller, and it's just a little bit longer. It does also have a similar silhouette. It also has comfort grooves, but definitely not as deep. Another mouse that it compares well to is the Vancer Caster. Very similar size, somewhat similar silhouette. It is a little bit straighter on the caster. It's not as defined, and it doesn't flare out at the bottom as much. But they are very similar heights. And then we got the glorious Model 1 Pro. And you can see this one is a little bit shorter, a little bit taller, and has a similar silhouette on the bottom. I don't have a Viper Mini to pull out. It's somewhere in my garage. I'm not going to bother pulling it out, but it's very similar to the Deluxe Aim 800 Pro, to give you an idea. But if you are a fan of the Viper Mini, there's a good chance you'll probably like Dragonfly F1 series. So first off, I have about 19 by 10 centimeter hands, which is about a medium size hand. And grip styles, I can palm it, but my fingers do hang over a bit. You can definitely do a relaxed claw, and then you can fingertip it. So it pretty much supports most grip styles depending on the size of your hands. I think it's a pretty good universal size and shape. Some people are not going to like the very deep comfort grooves, but I personally think it's okay. And I definitely feel locked in when I'm holding this. My hand never cramped up while using these mice. And the 49 grams feels really nice. But again, I do have a little bit of a preference to the 55 grams on the max version. And if you're someone that does like a little bit higher in the back type of mouse, then you may not be a big fan of this. I would kind of like to see a version of this that did have a bigger hump in the back. That would be interesting, I think. Now, game performance wise, I definitely performed very well with all three of these mice. I will say there is a slight difference in smoothness with the Pro models. They're all exceptionally inexpensive. Even the most expensive one at $57 is very, very reasonable for what you get. Most other mice that have these specs is going to cost you well over $100 most likely. Even the baseline $40 mouse has competitors that are typically in the $70 to $90 range. So the 4K versions are definitely a pretty good deal. Now, again, the dongle comes separately, but I've heard that it's priced anywhere from $6 to $14, which is very reasonable. But again, if you have to order it separately, you're going to incur 2 shipping charges, and that could be, $10 or more each. So if you could get them together in some sort of bundle, that's definitely the ideal way to go. So if you're looking for a good FPS shooter type of mouse, definitely the Dragonfly might be up your alley. And it's for sure the best deal on the market currently for 4K, even with having to get the adapter separately. And honestly, even if these didn't have 4K ability built into them, and again, I haven't tested the 4K. Even without the 4K, I find that they're a tremendous value. I think the quality is very comparable to some of the bigger brands like Ninjutso and Pulsar. Maybe not quite to the quality of Lamzu and In-Game Gear and Vaxi, but it is very close. And for what you're paying, I think you're getting way more value for the money. The hardest thing about these mice is just getting a hold of one. And I understand, because they're such a good deal, everyone's trying to get one. So let's go ahead and do an overview of the software, and then we'll do a sound test, and we'll wrap up this video. All right, so this is the software for the baseline model. Now, if you end up getting more than one of these, you will have to have more than one different version of the software, because they have different MCUs. The baseline uses different software than the Pro versions, but they are very similar, as you'll see. So the debounce time is right here. I believe it was set to 8 milliseconds or 12 milliseconds. Definitely move this down. I haven't had any problem using any of the 3 mice at 0 milliseconds. You can do the keybinds here, and you got a memory for 4 different profiles. Battery indicators here. I couldn't find the dongle, so I've got this plugged in. That's why it's not showing up there. Right here, you got the DPI settings that you can adjust and customize. And then right here, polling rate. It came default at 1000 hertz, but always you want to make sure you check there. I also don't recommend enabling any of these. And then LOD defaulted to 1 millimeter, and there is no DPI effect on this, so ignore that. And then right here, there's simple macros if you want to create them. But that's it for the normal VGN Dragonfly. And I'll go ahead and bring out the software for the Pro. Okay, so this is the Pro version. And this is actually the default. And it was set to 8 milliseconds. I'll bring that down to 0 milliseconds. And battery indicator, we've got 25% left on there. Same as before, all the same keybind settings, same DPI settings, LOD default to 1 millimeter. Now here's where the Pro versions are different. You have motion sync that is enabled by default, and I would pretty much leave it there, and also 1000 hertz. And I believe somewhere here there'll be the 4000 hertz when we get the normal adapter. Now, again, these 2 modes right here are different than the other software. So you got sensor mode, and by default, it's under LP mode, and there's HP mode, and that stands for low power, high power. So if you want a little bit better performance at the sacrifice of battery life, you just change it to HP. And then this firepower mode, this is extremely confusing, and I actually had to ask to verify exactly what this is. And this is basically a sleep mode. So if you enable it here, you can select anywhere from 30 seconds to 30 minutes that it'll go into sleep mode. And basically when it goes into sleep mode, you have to click the one of the main mouse buttons in order to wake it up. So you can enable this if you want, but I have it off by default. I just think if they had a little bit better translation of the software, it would be less confusing. I mentioned it to them. Maybe they'll fix it in newer versions, because I have no idea where they get firepower mode as sleep mode. It's weird to me, but things don't always translate well. Macros here, and that's pretty much it. They're very similar, other than the stuff down here on this version of the software. But let's get on to the sound test. All right, so we'll first start off by testing the baseline model. Now the Pro model. Now the Pro Max model. So to wrap things up, again, these mice are a tremendous value, and I highly recommend them all. I would, though, probably just spend the extra $10 and get the regular Pro version over the baseline one, just because the Nordic MCU is definitely a better MCU. But if you definitely don't have the money, you can't go wrong with the baseline. Or if that's all you can get a hold of, the baseline definitely is a good mouse. And at $40, it's definitely the best mouse under $50. And then at $50, the Pro is definitely one of the best mice available. Now, the Max, again, if you want the extra battery life and you don't mind it being a little bit heavier, you may prefer that. Maybe you've tried some that were under 50 grams, you didn't like it, then maybe the Max will be more up your alley. It's definitely the favorite of my three that I have, and this is probably the one I'll continue to use. So anyways, that's about all it for this video. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative, and if you did, please leave a like. It definitely helps out the channel, especially lately. The algorithm really has likes being very important. And if you haven't subbed yet, I definitely appreciate a sub. I know I haven't been doing very many videos lately. I've definitely had some health issues over the last month. I lost my voice basically for a couple different reasons, but I've got it mostly back. But if I sound a little bit different, that's just because of that. But I'm definitely going to try and catch up on, I have a backlog of videos and reviews to do, but I'll do my best to catch up. And I apologize for that, but it's definitely out of my control. But anyways, let's just move forward, and hopefully we'll have lots more cool things to show on the channel. So again, thanks for your support, and I'll see you next time. Later.